Hello and welcome to Newsmax Now.
Coming up today, the very latest, more cleanup after another round of violent storms injures dozens of people while destroying homes and businesses.
And memorial set for today across Mississippi after 2 police officers are shot down in the line of duty. This as the suspects are due in court, 2 of them, to answer to capital murder charges.
And Jeb Bush courts evangelicals with a big speech at Liberty University, but did it fall flat?
Plus why he says he would have invaded Iraq in 2003, and so would have Hillary. Newsmax Now starts right now.
And welcome to this Monday edition of the program.
And Miranda, unfortunately, we're picking up from where we left off last week. We got a community mourning the deaths of local police officers, that in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and more severe weather in our nation's midsection, and that's where we'll start this hour. We turn our attention to Texas, where searches continue right now in the eastern Texas town of Van after this powerful storm and a possible tornado blew through. More than 24 people are hurt so far, and K-9 units are on the ground searching for at least 10 people still unaccounted for.
These K-9s will be assigned to a task force and will be sent out through the affected areas to determine if we do have anybody that's missing.
Officials say about a third of that town, which is southeast of Dallas, Texas, was damaged in the storm.
In the eastern South Dakota town of Delmont, a tornado ripped apart a Lutheran church. 9 people were hurt, while in other parts of the state, a Mother's Day snowstorm dropped 1.5 feet of snow in the Black Hills.
And the defense has now rested in the penalty phase of the Boston Marathon bombing trial. Lawyers for Dzhokhar Tsarnaev have never denied that he took part in that deadly bombing, but they're trying to convince this jury to give him life behind bars instead of the death penalty. One of the final witnesses, Sister Helen Pragin, made famous in the movie Dead Man Walking. She was on the stand. She told the jury that Tsarnaev expressed genuine sorrow for the victims after the attack.
And a memorial is set today for the 2 Mississippi police officers murdered over the weekend. Officer LaCory Tate was just 25 years old. He wanted to be a police officer all of his life. Officer Benjamin Dean was a father of 2 and former Officer of the Year. Both were killed in Hattiesburg when shots rang out during a traffic stop.
Well, 4 people in connection to this attack are under arrest now, and 2 of them face capital murder charges. Melvin Banks and Joan Calloway are facing those charges. Banks' brother Curtis is also facing charges of accessory after the fact. A 4th suspect, Cornelius Clark, was arrested yesterday on an obstruction of justice charge. The Banks brothers and Calloway have their initial court appearances at some point today.
The warning now from the Secretary of Homeland Security.
We're very definitely in a new phase in the global terrorist threat, where the so-called lone wolf could strike at any moment.
Jay Johnson says internet use by groups like ISIS may inspire homegrown terrorists, but not necessarily direct them, and that he believes it could give law enforcement less of a warning. The response comes following last week's free speech event in Texas.
Well, many of those feel-good moments you witness at NFL games when teams honor the military were actually paid for by your tax dollars. A report by NJ.com says over the past 4 years, the Defense Department has paid out nearly $5.5 million for salutes for the military at NFL football games. 14 teams were paid, including the Jets, the Colts, and the Ravens.
A summit between the U.S. and Arab leaders will be minus one very key leader. The King of Saudi Arabia just pulled out of the event this week at Camp David instead of sending a couple of deputies. Now, the New York Times says the king's decision may reflect his unhappiness with a potential nuclear deal with Iran.
And it looks like a lot of celebrities aren't exactly too concerned about the historic drought in California. Check out the lush green lawn at the home of Khloe Kardashian or the manicured yard at the home of her sister, Kim. She, of course, shares that house with Kanye West, or even the well-watered grass of Barbra Streisand's home here. And, of course, the Playboy Mansion still has quite a bit of grass along with waterfalls and streams. Neighbors to the stars say the rich and famous just pay the extra rates for the water and let the city be the one that has to pick up the tab in terms of usage of this water. A little special.
But that's not, they've been having water issues for a long time. I mean, it's easy to point the finger and place all the blame. I was talking to a friend of mine that lives out in LA, and he's like, look, this has been an ongoing issue.
Maybe the grass is fake, like we've talked
He was
about
saying,
too.
yeah, like 10-20% of it has to do with private use.
Right, but maybe those celebrities should be the examples for everybody else. Just saying, we
You're
can
just
trying
to guilt
that.
them, make them feel bad?
I don't know. Pretty big drop. We do want to focus our attention now on some of the attention-grabbing sound bites from the presidential candidates of today and perhaps of tomorrow. One of those candidates, Jeb Bush, is not officially in the race yet, but he does say he is his own man. But like his brother, W, he would have authorized an invasion of Iraq. Let's take a listen.
Would you have authorized the invasion?
I would have, and so would have Hillary Clinton, just to remind everybody, and so would have almost everybody that was confronted with the intelligence they got.
You don't think it was a mistake?
In retrospect, the intelligence that everybody saw, that the world saw, not just the United States, was faulty.
And so there you go. Jeb Bush, he's going to do this interview with Fox News, and that is a question a lot of folks wanted to ask him. This was interesting coming off the heels of that report last week in which he was asked by a group of donors about what role his brother might be playing, and he said he's been a good advisor on the nation of Israel.
Be interesting once he formally announces whether or not we'll be seeing the likes of his brother on his campaign trail.
You can't deny that they're brothers, and he's obviously taking that into account.
Well, Hillary Clinton's only Democratic challenger, Bernie Sanders, spent some time on This Week in Face the Nation. Now, some have questioned whether or not Sanders has the ability to financially compete. Here's what he had to say about that.
So I don't think we're going to outspend Hillary Clinton or Jeb Bush or anybody else. But I think we are going to raise the kinds of money that we need to run a strong and winning campaign.
It's something that I thought was interesting about Sanders and what he's been saying recently is, you know, he's calling people out by name. He's calling out the Koch brothers by name. He's calling out Hillary Clinton by name. But it's going to be interesting to see how well he does do. And also, he calls out the Citizens United Supreme Court case.
Okay, right.
Now, if you talk to folks about campaign finance,
he says he would actually elect a Supreme Court justice to overturn that.
Well, if you look at some of the issues, when you talk to people about that particular case, they say the real issue is the McCain-Feingold Campaign Finance Reform Act that did not work, and that's what got us to Citizens United. So maybe it's really Congress's responsibility to readdress the issue when it comes to campaign finance, but we know they won't do that.
I wonder if they'll do that, because hasn't Hillary Clinton been kind of talking about some campaign finance reform that she'll do after and if she wins election?
I don't think anybody's going to change anything. And again, the attitude, I think, of the country has changed too. Going back a couple election cycles, people realize this is what it takes now to run one of these campaigns. There's no secret here. It's going to take billions of dollars.
Billions of dollars. National Journal editor Ron Fournier made his opinion known this weekend. Here he is taking a swipe at Hillary Clinton.
They've convinced themselves, because Bill Clinton did beat Bob Dole and did beat Bush with his trust numbers being worse than theirs. They've learned from that lesson that Hillary Clinton, her trust numbers can go down, as they have in most polls, and it doesn't matter. I think they're wrong. I think times have changed enough. She's not the kind of candidate he was, and mainly the times have changed in a way that transparency and accountability and integrity are really going to matter this election, and it's not something she can just gloss over.
And I love it when you kind of agree.
Well, no, I think he's right. I think there is a different appetite now from the public based on with the internet and the accessibility to information out there. Hillary Clinton is running, I hate to borrow the term from Marco Rubio, a 20th century campaign almost, where she is not very accessible to members of the media. The New York Times wrote that story, things we would ask Hillary if we could. You see the table in front of her, the partitions between her and the media. Meanwhile, she's meeting with quote unquote regular folks, and it seems very staged.
Well, I think that's the biggest issue, though. You brought that up. We were talking about accountability and transparency, and you said you really thought her biggest challenge was going to be basically likability.
Well,
appearing
like a normal person.
Right.
Like, you know, and that's why I brought this up last week when we played the clip.
But don't you think she faces a different challenge just being a woman and
I think
being
she
a
faces,
former first lady?
I think that's true. I think she faces a challenge because she's been around the block before on this campaign trail, and I think she's trying to reinvent herself, and without much success. That's the challenge she faces. I don't necessarily think the challenges are because she's a woman. I think Carly Fiorina faces a different set of challenges too.
But you've said this before. You've said, Speaker of the House, John Boehner, you said he can cry and no one says a thing. They might make fun of him a little bit, but it's not necessarily a sign of weakness. But if Hillary Clinton were to do that,
well, when she cried in New Hampshire the last time around, it actually benefited her a little bit in some polls. So it's a double-edged sword, the emotional aspect. But what she's doing right now, apparently working with Democratic voters, but there is some traction from Republicans gaining ground on her in some of the polls. And We'll talk about some of those posts coming up here later today.
We will.
Also, Miranda, we're going to talk about some other stuff. Go ahead.
Go ahead. All right. Former NFL quarterback Fran Tarkenton joins us to talk about his new project and how it could help your small business. And later, are your plants spying on you? Believe it or not, we'll break it down in your roundtable. That's all.